Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I want to talk a little bit about a topic that comes up from time to time. And part of it's stitching chisels, the way that I stitch my belts, and just some topics around that area. And then I also had a few people ask me to compare some of the different chisels that I actually own. So I thought I would talk a little bit about those and where I utilize those the best. And then I really want to get some feedback from you guys, but I'll explain that when we get over here on the workbench. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. We'll get over here and get started. All right, so let's take a quick look and I'll try to explain how I got to where I'm at, and maybe it'll help you in the decision process, or at least, if nothing else, maybe you find it humorous how I got to the point that I'm at. But when I first started, I bought a set of Tandy 5mm diamond shaped stitching irons that I used on a few projects. After that, I was looking for something that was a little bit different, and it was a 5mm set. So I purchased a 4mm set here from Weaver, looking to just have something a little bit different in my arsenal in case I wanted to make, something different. When I received it and opened it up, these were actually the same size as the Tandy 5mm. So I don't know if they measure them differently or what. But so I had this 4mm set to go with the Tandy, but ended up being the same. Shortly after that, I decided I wanted to, I liked the larger pattern, or I thought I would like a larger pattern. So I ordered this set of Weaver stitching irons. And this set of, I shouldn't call them irons. I think this is more considered a chisel, but I bought this set of the Weaver stitching chisels, 5mm. And since then, I've used it to make literally hundreds of hand sewn belts. I do have a sewing machine, but I've never used it in making a belt. I know how to do it, but I've made similar items like handles on bags, and I've sewed them and didn't have a problem. But that's a topic for another day. So I started using this, and I've made literally hundreds. I think this year I just looked because someone was asking me, how many belts do I average? And I'm right at 2 belts a week is what I've averaged. I've had several weeks where I've made 7 or 8 belts, but then I have other weeks where I spend all the time making DOP kits or wallets, travel totes, and such. So when I started with this, I would, well, let me show you here. I'll show you a little bit of a couple things that came up. So I started utilizing this set here mainly on belts. So let me make a couple holes here, because this is what I get people say. There's a couple things that people say about this style of sewing. There are a lot of people, and they do fabulous work, and they'll use pricking irons. So you're just kind of laying out the pattern, even though it looks like a lot of those people drive them through on, especially on thinner projects, and an awl and needle to create it. So a couple of things that people say is that this Weaver set makes these what they consider huge holes, and you can see light through those holes. So let me talk about just that part first. This billet here, I'm working on a Ranger style belt, and I just finished stitching this morning, and I'm about ready to assemble it. But the point of showing you this is I use those 5mm stitching chisels and created that pattern. There's no gaps. There's not any openings. And when you're creating the holes with that, you are cutting some leather, especially here on this diagonal, but a lot of that hole opening is because you stretch that leather open, and then over a short period of time it usually closes back up, and then this thread here, it's .08 Tyaritza, does a good job of filling that. And I haven't even tapped this down yet, because when you tap it down it further flattens out that thread. Let me do that real quick, I'll show you. And that helps to define that stitch. So there's not any gap there. And I think part of the thing is I hear people or read people make comments that you know, those large holes let water in, let dust and dirt in. So I'm making belts, and so I'm not worried about having dust or water penetrate through the stitch because it's a belt. It's going to go around that. I suppose if you are making saddlebags, that the tighter that hole is, the better of a seal you've got, and the more waterproof your project would be. So I think you do have to take into consideration what you're making and find the tools that work for you there. So that was the set that I've used the most that I purchased. And I started making a few belts where people wanted, say, a double row of stitching. And I really got concerned about, you know, trying to, you know, create the holes and get them without, you know, taking up so much space because I had, say, patterns I was wanting to do in the middle there. And I was at the leather trade show in Prescott, Arizona, and was talking with Aaron Heiser about the little bit of a dilemma that I had there. And he suggested that I try his set of diamond chisels. So I picked it up and looked at it, and I'm like, wow, that is really thin. I mean, how durable are those going to be? Should I be concerned about having the tines, you know, bend? And he said, if they bend, you call me and I'll send you another set. So, you know, that helped to alleviate my concern there a little bit. But on that topic, I do hear where people, I even read one where someone was on their first project. They said they bent the tine on their weaver set. I'm typically either working on Pondo, or a lot of times I'll have a scrap of leather underneath of it that I'm working into, so that when I go to tip it, it's not in anything that's hard or stationary, say like a piece of wood or some of the white plastic cutting boards. So anyway, I guess maybe I'm lucky with my tools, but like I said, I've made hundreds of sets that way. Let's look here real quick. I'll use my leather gauge here and tell you the thickness of this tine here is just under what would be 3.5 ounces of thickness, and this weaver set is 4.5, and I don't know if they're all the same. I never checked that. I rarely use the 4. Yeah, it's 4.5 as well. I utilize the 1, 2, and 5 the most. So anyway, that's how I ended up with that, and I used it on quite a few projects, and I still do, especially when I'm in, say, thinner leather like this one here, and because maybe I'm making a wallet and I want my stitching really close to the edge, then I feel like I'm being more delicate here with that than I would be if I'm using the weaver set. Am I trying to talk you into what you should get? I'm not. I'm trying to explain how I got where I'm at, and then you can take that into consideration. But it is nice that it's this tight pattern. The one thing for me, the reason why you don't see me use this all the time, and I was excited with, you know, a pattern that is you know, twice as long thereabouts as this one, that it would make that process quicker. But the issue for me is that when I'm creating these stitching holes and then I go to sew, let me grab the thicker one here. When I go to sew, if you've watched, I have my own way of stitching, and I know it's different than probably most people. I get comments on that, which is fine. But when I'm stitching and I have it in my stitching horse, I put in a needle from this side, and then while that one's still in there, I put in the needle from the other side. And I know it's unorthodox, or it's the Robert Little approach. And then I push both needles through and I pull them out. When I do that, or try to do that with this set from Maker's Leather Supply, since the hole is so much tighter, then it's harder to do it that way. And I could stitch the other way, but once again, I talked about, try to come up with a process that works for me, and then I just utilize that. And I don't think anybody's worried about it. Well, let me back up. I don't think that the holes look clunky at all in this in relation to the stitching. They're closed up good around it. I think that my stitching is well defined, and I think that that process works for me and for those items. Let's talk about the next one here, and that is the lacing chisels. The lacing chisels, when I was first stitching, I was doing it in my lap, and I would have stitches that, well, one, if I was trying to get into a tighter area, I thought that these might work nicely for that because they are thin profile. So if I want 2 rows of stitching in here, I can fit 2 rows of stitching in an area pretty well because they don't take up a lot of space. The other thing that I liked about those is that when I'm stitching, especially in my lap, and if you look at the stitches, you would have some of these stitches here that instead of this one being tucked on the left side of that one, this one's on the right, left. Sometimes you get those that are reversed, and it has to do with the way you're stitching it. And when I was stitching my lap, it was more of a prevalent problem and really drove me nuts in my first 30 or 40 belts. One reason why I stitch the way I do is it fixed that problem. So when I was stitching with these, what I found is since it's not set at an angle, then those stitches run nice and straight. And then I also think I've done this on, more of what I call, a dress belt, because the diamond pattern, I think, looks a little bit more casual than a straight stitch line looks with that. So that's where I've utilized that the most. I think that there's a lot of that's there, isn't there? So that's how I got to where I'm at on my stitching chisels here. And so I am in the market to buy. I want to try a more expensive. People equate more expensive with better, and a lot of times it is, but a different set of stitching chisels. And I've inquired with a few different people. I had conversation with one of my viewers the other day about a set of stitching irons that they were using. They might have been actually more pricking irons, but I've looked at some of those, and the sets are like, by the time I get, I would want something similar to what I have here. And I wouldn't mind having a bigger one, but I need at least a single, a double, and a 6 tine. I don't necessarily need the 4 tine, so I could get by with a single, a double, a 6, and say maybe 11 or 12 tine. But when I'm looking at those, they look like they're like $300, and I've got lots of expensive tools on my workbench. This knife here, I think, was $170. So it's not that I have a problem spending the money on something if I see the value in it. But I'm concerned about buying a set of expensive stitching irons or pricking irons, depending on how they're marketed, that aren't going to work for me. So maybe understanding my process on how I go about doing this, is there a set out there that you see value that you think that I might find useful in my process? Let me turn the camera around here. Well, I hope you found that interesting. If nothing else, maybe you have a different understanding or better understanding of where I'm coming from and direction I'm headed. And I know there's people out there that say the way I do it is a lazy way of doing it. But I tell you what, I'm trying to produce something. It's a hobby business for me. So first and foremost, I have to enjoy doing it. And if I have to do it a different way to meet someone's idea of how it should be done properly, and if I don't enjoy that, then, I'm not going to do that. So, it's about, what I enjoy. And I also feel that from the position of my YouTube channel, I don't want to give you a narrow view saying this is the only way you can do it, because I think there's a lot of people out there that create beautiful work and they don't do it this way. This last February, I was in a class, and there was, I think, like 20 other artists in there, and we were making a guitar strap. I'm looking at it down here. And when they found out I hand-sewed belts, they're like, you should buy a sewing machine. I have a sewing machine. And then they're kind of like, I'm done talking to you. You have a sewing machine and you're not using it to sew belts. I get that as well. And if I was needing to put food on the table with what I was selling, then maybe I would go to the sewing machine, because after the last show, I had somewhere around 20 or 24 belts that I needed to make, knowing that if I'm moving along pretty quick. I can make 2 a day. That's 12 days to do that. And I think I probably could have finished those belts in probably at the pace I was working in less than a week if I machine sewed those belts. But that's a topic for something else. So really where this is going is I wanted you to understand what I use, why I use it. It's been a while since I talked about it. I've had quite a few questions in that area. But I really do want to test other means of creating the holes, whether you want to call them pricking irons, stitching irons. I do know the difference. I know how they're categorized. But if there's a set out there that you think I should take a look at, would you let me know? Because I do want to try it. I want to try it for a couple reasons. One is there's nothing wrong with looking at your work, trying something else and seeing, can I improve the quality of the item? I think my belts look good. I'm not saying that they look bad. I'm not here trying to get you give me, props to prop me up about how my belts look. But I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with looking at that. I know Tiger Woods, when he was at the top of his game, totally changed his golf swing trying to see if he could get better yet. And I don't have a problem with, doing the same. So let me know what you think on other stitching irons or pricking irons, as it may be, out there for me to try. And I'm going to try to do a little bit of research. It'll probably be a little before I get to, if I buy them, before I get to the point that I'm showing that. But I guess that's really the main thing for today. Was I wanted to explain how I got to where I'm at, what I like about them. And I like the feel of the makers. It's just that my style of stitching, which I think I'm a little bit of a unicorn in that area, is different than most people. So if you stitch, one needle at a time through the hole, you may want to consider this set from Makers. It was, I think it was $59 is what I paid for it, but I've had them for like 3 years. But I've used it more on like wallets and smaller items like that. I haven't probably made more than 4 or 5 belts with this Makers set. I just really gravitate to the Weaver set, and it works really well for me. And I find myself talking in a loop, which is a good indication that it's time to move on here. So that's it for today. I hope you're having a great day out there. Please like, share, and subscribe, but more importantly, have a great day.